And welcome to this very special report entitled Angels and the Great Deception Exposed. With me today, of course, is Mr. Jay Weidner. You can find his work at jweidner.com. He is the writer and producer of JFKX, Solving the Crime of the Century, and he's also the author of The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday. Mr. Jay Weidner. Jay, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you, John?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good.
All right, Jay, I'm excited to have you on for this conversation. Of course, this is part two to an explosive interview Janine and I produced on December 9th. This was part one here of The Angels and the Great Deception Exposed. Jay, just to begin with here, we are triple casting on YouTube, Twitter, and also on Rumble. I want to spend a few minutes here on YouTube with you to kind of introduce the subject matter, but then we're going to drop off the YouTube feed and really get into it on the Rumble feed. So folks, if you're watching us on YouTube, I'll be bringing the links down now to the Rumble feed. And you can also, if for some reason Rumble is not working for you, find us on our Twitter. We are live there as well. Jay, before we start, you had a post a couple of months ago on your Facebook, and it had something to do with, let me see if I can bring this up for the audience members here. You said something to the effect that this book you had been waiting for all of your life. What did you mean by that? Where do you want to go with that? Let's start there.
Well, I may or may not know, but probably one of my best friends of my whole life was Jordan Maxwell, and literally spent hundreds of hours of time with Jordan. And Jordan's number one message that he would sometimes he would stand on his chair back when he wasn't overweight, and he would scream, "It's the Elohim! It's the Elohim!" He'd scream, and the neighbors would complain, "What's going on over there? Are you guys drinking or something?" And no, it's just Jordan trying to tell us what's going on in the Bible, and nobody wants to listen to him except for me. And so when I finally got the book, I've been waiting for it because I heard about it in Italian and hadn't gotten it. And when I got it, I told a mutual friend of ours, because Jordan is long gone now, I said that if Jordan, I'm going to phrase this in the right way for PG rating, if Jordan was reading this book, he would have a hard one for like a week. That's how much this book agrees with everything that he ever said in his entire philosophy. And somehow he knew it. I know he went to the translators and all the other things, and he wanted to find out, just like Bislino wanted to find out what the heck this book was really saying. And so that's why when I read the book, all I could think of was my good friend Jordan Maxwell, and how my reading this book, somehow he's reading it through my eyes. So wherever he is right now, and knowing that finally he is being, everything that he said for 40 years is now coming to light, and we're all beginning to realize that we have been manipulated by a group of beings who are not God, who are the Elohim. And Jordan Maxwell's main message was that. That was it. If he could have said anything in life, it would have been that one message he wanted to get across to everyone. And so now we as a species are getting more mature about our past and dealing with things. And we're dealing with translations that have been around for a while. But they're coming to light in pop culture, you might say, just like in the Naked Bible. And so for the first time, we're getting correct translations of the Old Testament, of the Torah, and frankly, the New Testament too, although the New Testament the retranslations of the New Testament are not as shocking as the retranslations of the Old Testament, which clearly say that we are being ruled by a group of beings called the Elohim, masquerading as gods, exactly like the Gnostics of 2,000 years ago, the early Christians. People don't realize the very first Christians, before Constantine took over the church in 300, were Gnostics, and they believed that Jesus had fomented a rebellion against the Elohim, and that was the whole point of Jesus's message, and that got obfuscated and destroyed by Constantine and the various bishops and archbishops that got together and rewrote the Bible, and then made Gnostics the number one villain of everyone and went out and killed them all. As a Gnostic, I can say that, that is, whoever somebody wrote in, vindication is sweet, and that is exactly right. I believe that I feel vindicated, that Jordan feels vindicated. And let me say something else here quick, because I want to get into other things. This has been known for a long time. This isn't new. Mm-hmm. These translations have been known for at least 150 years in the West, in the occult world, right, in the German occult world, in the Austrian occult world, in the Italian occult world. They all knew this like in the 1880s. We were talking, I have occult books talking about it. Oh my God, this is what it's really saying here. It's not saying that there's this almighty God that's directing everything in the Old Testament. They're saying that this group of apparently aliens or off-planet beings of some kind are doing it. And I believe that knowledge created the 20th century. And I'm not going to get into that because it's too hot, but I believe that knowledge of the truth about what is going on caused World War I, World War II, the Cold War, everything that's going on now, what happened in 2020 with the you-know-what, and all the rest of it is all part of this thing, because the Elohim let too much out, and now we know about him. And now,
hold on, let me slow you down a little bit. You're like a wild horse here. There's so much you're getting into, guys. We have a lot to get into today. We're going to get into all of that. We're going to do our best to provide you with some reference material on screen as well, some on-screen graphics, and really get into some of these conversations. Before I do that, Jay, while we're still here on YouTube, let's take a quick backtrack here while people are still logging in to watch our live. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you're the writer and the producer here of JFKX, Solving the Crime of the Century. Now, this also has ties in this whole ET story, of course. So explain to the audience first why you're so passionate about this documentary, where they can find it now, and why you're so excited to be able to finally be able to share your version of the history here as it pertains to JFK.
Yeah, so you can find it on Amazon Prime, and also now it's up on Vimeo. Just type in JFKX on Vimeo, you'll find it. That's international, so anyone can watch it now internationally for the first time. And I'll never let that ever slip away again, because the international audience has been much more receptive to the movie than the national audience, which I think personally they're more sophisticated and more willing to suspend their belief. So what we did in JFKX, and I believe it was pure genius, was we took that software that they use for old movies, where they can take an old movie like from World War I, and then they turn it into looking like it's shot on 4K, 24 frames a second, and you can see the color and everything. Well, we took that same exact software and had JFK run through that. The Zapruder film, which Abraham Zapruder shot of the assassination of JFK. We ran that through because it's always been kind of grainy and hard to see and all that. And so for the first time, and here it is, we show the Zapruder film in its 4K clarity, and we can see actually what's really going on in the Zapruder film. And then we bring in a lot of ancillary data that has never been discussed before, like the fact that the Zapruder film has 2 splices in it, which the Warren Commission did not know about. The fact that there appears to be optical printing going on after the second splice. The fact that nobody reacts to high-powered gunshots going off, even though they're within 40 yards of the assassination. No one in the car reacts to guns going off. None of the bystanders react to guns going off. No one reacts to guns going off. And we call attention to all of these anomalies and then wrap it up and show you exactly what was going on, which is, in the end, it really does go back to what we're talking about today, because it was kind of an escape, a way to get away from the overwhelming power of the forces that rule our planet. And JFK really, truly did, and his brother Bobby, whom after making this film, I have come away with like, wow, these two they were going after him. They were going after the people that were right now running our country and the world. And they knew that if they didn't stop them back in the early 1960s, that they would take over everything. And they did not stop them, although they did attempt. And we talk all about that in the movie. We give credit to Bobby, who turns out to be the bulldog of bulldogs and ran right over the mob and several other very powerful forces in our country. And it's a must see. And I don't want to spoil it because it's not just controversial, but it's mind blowing.
Well, thank you for that, Jay. I really appreciate that introduction. And of course, it all ties into the conversation we're having today. So I'm so excited that you were able to do that. You were guided to do that in the timeline. And I agree with you with this information. Like, I wanted to interview Jordan Maxwell for the longest time. And as I was trying to set that up, he passed away. So I was just a little bit slow here in the creation of my channel, getting into the speed of things. And but his record remains. And as you said, he's been at this for many years, and he planted the seed for all of us here to now cultivate and continue this research. So folks, I just put the links now to the Rumble feed. If you want to join us there, please click on that from the YouTube feed here. I'm going to be dropping off the YouTube feed now. Remove, yes. And there you go. We are now live only on Rumble. So to introduce the subject matter here, we're of course talking about Mauro Biglino's book, The Naked Bible, and the second one here from this year, The Gods of the Bible. So let me play a short introductory clip of who this guy is, what his work is all about, and then we're going to start having this adult conversation here about this research that we're doing into the subject matter. So let me bring up the screen here, and tell me right away, Jay, if you can't hear this. I'm playing with two different screens here today. I want to make sure that everybody can hear this. Go ahead.
Mauro Biglino is an internationally
best-selling
Italian author,
Yes.
researcher, and highly regarded scholar of ancient Hebrew. For many years, he worked for Rome's St. Paul Press as a Bible translator, providing with great precision the literal meaning of Hebrew words for Vatican-approved interlinear Bibles. It is an exacting discipline. The scholar must be rigorous in avoiding any kind of interpretation of the word and give only the literal etymological meaning of each word part. Mauro's findings set him at odds with the conventional expectations of the Catholic world and propelled him onto the international stage, where his work has opened up a world of cultural memory recorded in the Bible, yet hidden from the public for centuries by mistaken translation and the dogmas of the Church. Together, Mauro and Paul show that the root meanings of a series of keywords in the Bible reveal an earlier layer of information very different to the story of God associated with the Bible. Hidden in plain sight in the pages of Genesis is an even more ancient narrative, one which reframes the whole story of human beginnings. The oldest word in the Bible rendered as God is the Hebrew word Elohim. But is that what the word means? And what are the implications of the translation choices surrounding this mysterious word?
Okay. That sets the stage for the conversation here today. Let me just bring up also, before I go too far, Jay, I'm just going to switch screens here. Part of the conversation I wanted to have with you, Jay, is your, I guess, evolution through life, why you got into alchemy, why you were inspired also by Stanley Kubrick, which has now connections again here with the moon landings to all of this stuff. It very much seems that you were guided throughout your life here to get to this subject matter. Can you share very quickly with the audience members how you got into filmmaking, why Kubrick and why alchemy was so important, and how now that translates into this work you're doing and this new research, and why perhaps you've been waiting all your life for this particular book?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting answer, because I got into filmmaking. I was a lost soul, and when I was 15, my girlfriend, who was rich and had a really fancy car and 1 year older than me, said, "Hey, I've got this film I saw last night. I want to see it again." I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And so she took me to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I didn't know what to say after I got done watching it. And I knew from that moment on that all I wanted to do was make films. Went out and bought a movie camera, learned everything I could, and went off. But the plot of 2001: A Space Odyssey is about these aliens who manipulate human beings into doing pretty much what they want. And which kind of I wasn't really thinking about at the time. But now in retrospect, I realize, of course, that Kubrick was trying to tell us about what we're talking about today. And he used several other films to also tell us about that. And so anyway, I was in Hollywood and I was working in the movie business. And on weekends, I would go collect books because I was a book collector. And one day I found Mystery of the Cathedrals by Fulcanelli, and I took it home and I read it and I could not understand it. And then I read it about 50 times before I started grokking it. And finally, I began to understand that basically alchemy is a science of these these Elohim, these advanced beings, and that the secret of alchemy was given to humans via their desire to have sex with women, human women. And so over and over, we have stories going back all the way back into antiquity of very good looking women being approached by the Elohim for sex. And these women saying, no, no, not really. I'm not interested in you. And then them begging them. And then, okay, well, you give me the secrets of your science and then maybe I'll do it. And that's how we discovered the secrets of alchemy, as scant as they are. And
well, don't go too fast there. That's an important part. Let me bring up, you produced a video on Reality Check. I believe it was last week. I was fascinated by this. You went back here to the center of the galaxy and the yugas of time in this particular video, but you talked about Isis and how she also relates here to sharing the alchemical knowledge to humanity. Share that specific story here with the audience members as well. And
yeah, so I'm not talking about Isis, the god,
Mhm.
goddess. I'm talking about Isis, who was a prophet. That many women were named Isis, of course, in Egypt, and she was a young woman who had special abilities, psychic abilities, and she would do prophecy, and everyone adored her. And she was walking down the street in Egypt one day, and an Elohim, they're quite obvious apparently from how they look. They're tall and have pale white skin, and they look different than us. And one of them came up, they're quite handsome, I guess, and said, I want to, have sex with you. You're gorgeous. And she said, no, not really. I don't want to have sex with you. And she got him to beg and beg. And finally, he told her that I'll come back tomorrow with someone who knows the secrets of alchemy, and he'll tell them to you, and then you and I can have sex. Well, we never find out if she had sex with him. I hope she didn't, but she did get the secrets, and she passed them on to her son, who passed them on and created a group of people that kept the alchemical secrets. And what I think occurred from this incident, and this may have been this incident I'm about to describe to you may have happened before this incident, but I believe that some humans realized that the key to breaking the Elohim was through our women, and they began using our women as bait, essentially. And they sent them in to get the knowledge. And what happened is we began getting more and more knowledge, began figuring out more and more stuff. And at first, the Elohim weren't that concerned with it because it wasn't really affecting them. In some ways, it was helping them because we were producing more food and producing better wine and all the stuff that the Elohim like to consume. And they weren't concerned. But then at a certain point, some of the more deeper secrets started getting out, like the elixir of life and the secrets of gold and all of that. And at that point, I believe that the chief council or whatever, I call them the Eloni or the Alani. It's not a person's name. I think it's more of a ranking, like at the top of the line, the top of the pyramid. They put down their hammer and said, nope, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. You can't have any more relations. And that was when the hammer came down, which I don't know, 1800 years ago, 1500 years ago. I don't know when it came down. I presume it came down with the fall of Rome around 400 AD. And the reason I say that is because of the strange lacuna of absolutely nothing happening between 400 AD and 1400 AD. There's no advancements in shipping, boats, artillery, weapons, anything. There's just no advancements in anything for that 1,000 years. And it's quite baffling. And I think that's when they put the hammer down. They slammed down, and now there's no more new inventions, and everybody's kind of lost. And they call it the Dark Ages, of course. in history. I don't know if that's true, but it was definitely, the Elohim have separated themselves from their interactions with us, which they were doing quite frequently. The Greek myths and the Vedic myths and the Chinese myths and South America and Central America, and even the Salish, as Cliff High was pointing out, from the Pacific Northwest, have their own stories of all this. So they're ubiquitous along the line that we have been manipulated by them. But here's the thing that's the most important part, is we have been, we were made apparently as slaves to do the work for the Elohim, mine gold and grow food and all the rest of the stuff. And what they did was they took away all of our ability to actually exist in our environment. So we don't have fangs, we don't have claws, we can't run fast, we're pathetic. I had a bunch of chickens get loose in my ranch the other day, and I had to go chase them. It was pathetic. I mean, it was pathetic. These little tiny chickens, and I'm literally 2 hours running around trying to grab these chickens, and right. I'm physically inept. I couldn't do it, and I'm pretty good about physicality, and I couldn't do it. Finally, I got them because I used a box and threw it over the top of them. But I had to end up using an instrument. I could not do it myself. Yeah. And that's the point. So the Elohim have made us kind of useless in our environment. And if they took away all of our stuff, fire, shelter, clothing, and weaponry, we would all die. Mm-hmm. And so, but here's the other thing that's really important, so that we don't despair. And that is that we are divine creatures. And the Elohim, either on purpose, the Enki story seems to imply that the Elohim or the Anunnaki gave us a soul on purpose to redeem us somehow. And we should all, if that's true, and I do believe that is, they didn't give us a soul, they let us keep our soul, is what they did. And that created a divine connection, which drives the Elohim nuts. And we did a show a long time ago about the movie Dark City, which is really about how the Elohim, who are the aliens in that movie, are trying to figure out what makes us tick. And they're looking for our soul. And over they change the world and try to regroup it, looking for the thing that they can't have that we have. And I believe there's some truth to that. I believe that we have something that they are jealous of. Mm-hmm. And so they suppress us and do everything they can to keep us down on the farm. And right now, apparently, I'm glad we're on Rumble, is that it looks like they're thinning the herd. Right. And that's what's been going on since 2020. Apparently, they have decided there's too many of us and they're going to get rid of a lot of us. And they are getting rid of a lot of us. If you guys are following some of the actuary statistics coming out of insurance companies. So there's a great die-off going on right now. And I believe that every time human beings begin to discover the truth about the Elohim do something drastic.
And we're at that time now. Folks, if you want to check out this movie decode we did with Jay Weidner, Julie from Maison Jupiter also helped us with the astrology. Fascinating episode, how all of this ties in. I note that there are tall white creatures also depicted in this movie. Cliff, you just mentioned that. Let me see if I can bring up a comment from Cliff in the chat here. I don't want to go too fast with all of this stuff. You talked about that missing time where nothing happens. Cliff was saying, hey, does those 1,000 years really exist? And I'm reminded of Anatoly Flamenco also in his work, suggesting that they took a period of time and copied it to fill a gap here. What's your take on that missing time period and why perhaps that was?
All right. This is a great subject. As an ex-Catholic brought up in the church, I can tell you that I was very baffled when I was young, and I would hear the priests talking about how the church was the new Israel. And I'm like, what? What does that mean? And how the old Israel had died away and the church had now become the new Israel. And I could not understand it. Well, Jordan Maxwell set me straight. What they're talking about is that when the Rome and Titus destroyed Israel in 66 AD, the mantle of the covenant with Yahweh that the Israelites had with with this member of the Elohim named Yahweh, the church took. They took that covenant, and they convinced the Elohim and Yahweh that they were the new purveyors of the covenant. And so they became the spiritual Israel as opposed to the physical Israel. And any Catholic knows that you're brought up with this crazy concept that the church is the spiritual Israel, and you can't figure it out. But once you understand that the church is telling you they made a covenant with Yahweh to become, their servants, then you begin to understand what's going on. So we've been brought up by this religion to believe that we're dealing with these exalted beings called angels, and that's not at all what they are. And like you said earlier, there is no religion in the Old Testament. I mean, in the Torah, there's no religion. There's nothing. There's no religion. I've known this for years. And there's no religion in any of, like, say, the sacred songs of the Jewish people. My wife's Jewish, and frequently in the old days, we'd go to synagogues for funerals or weddings, and I would go through the hymn books because I wasn't really interested in what was going on, and I would read the lyrics to the hymns. And I would point out to her afterwards, look at these lyrics. They're talking about, hey, let's go and kill all these people, and let's exalt ourselves in the glory of Yahweh as we murder children and women, and over and over. I'm like, this is your hymns? And she's like, oh, that is strange. Why is that? I never thought of that before. And the same thing is true, by the way, if you go to kirtan, the singing that goes on in India. So kirtan is this really fun place where you have this lead singer, and he comes out and he's singing in Sanskrit, and then everybody sings back whatever it is, repeats back what he just said, and it's this really fun thing. It's very melodic, and it's brings the whole group together. And we used to go all the time. And then one day I went up to the singer and I said, well, what are we singing? What are we singing here? And he's like, oh, well, I'll go through it here. And he pulled out the Sanskrit. He goes, well, this says, oh, great Rama, we praise you and we will do what you want. We give you our food. We give you our wine. We give you our cows. We give you whatever you ask. I'm like, you mean I'm just out there repeating this? And I realized I was caught in this like magical ritual, right? Of praise for Rama, or praise for the Elohim. And they're everywhere. They're not just in the Middle East. They're everywhere. They're all over the world. There's several gardens of Eden. There isn't just one Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden.
Don't go too fast. We'll get into that, folks. Here, history or science. This is.
Oh yeah. So I want to get back to that.
Yeah.
So the Catholic Church rewrote history, and that's what Fomenko found out. So the Catholic Church, which is really the culprit here in our Western world. They rewrote history to really write out all of this stuff and to make it look like we had somehow created all of this,
right? When
we haven't, when we're the inheritors of it.
I want to do a specific show on that because we're getting into the mistranslation, and that begs the question: did they mistranslate because they made a mistake? All of these mistakes, or did they mistranslate on purpose in order to create and perpetuate a system of control? We could do a whole show on debating that, but that's not here for today. But there's so much more we need to bring on to the scene here. So first, you just mentioned something, Jay, about sending our women to gather intelligence. You talked about Isis, the prophetess, and how she got into the alchemy knowledge. I think you and I should do a decode with Julie here and talk about Red Sparrow. In this particular series, they're sending all of these women to do this exact same work. So this is happening still to this day. So perhaps you and I can put that back on the board here. Okay. I wanted to go back to three things you said. One, the way the Elohim look. And so we have an inkling here in the Dark City decode. And we have another inkling of it here in Prometheus. Here in this particular he's seeding humanity. And I wanted to touch on that here too. In the book here and the research I've read so far, My understanding is that the Elohim came here. They did not create us. They changed us from what we were before. We had previous iterations of humanity in our own evolution, and they tweaked that evolution to their specific needs. But they by no means created us from the first place. That's my understanding. Are you on the same page with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've been here for hundreds of thousands of years. They only arrived a few thousand years ago, and they took um, us and they revamped us, adding in their own DNA somehow, and then removing several attributes of us so that we would be better slaves.
Okay, so that's clear for the record. That's my understanding also so far from the information. I'm going to play another clip here about God itself before people lose their shit here.
Yes.
First of all, well, before I do that, let's go back to what they look like. There's a lot of debate. Now, you said tall, pale skin. This might be so. Talk about the Scott there, Wrigley Scott and his brother here. Why perhaps they were read in on this, and why they were zooming in on this particular nomenclature. We see also this particular contraption, which of course is a representation also of what we've seen in Mesoamerica, the mind-to-machine control systems that Claude is decoding right now. How does that tie in, and why were they read in? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't think that the Elohim seeded us, but I think we were seeded. And I think our planet was seeded. And I have pretty good evidence to say that. And there's no way. The Cambrian layer has thousands of species that don't exist in the Precambrian layer. Evolution is falling apart all around us, the theory of evolution. And we're beginning to understand. Some of the best scientists are coming forth. And we now know we've been messed with royally. And even people like Tucker Carlson are now coming out and saying it. So we've actually crossed some kind of threshold in the last few months where we are now, the major media is dissipating and the alternative media is now concentrating on all of this. And we're forcing the powers that be to answer questions they would not answer before. So, I'm quite amused to turn on talk shows during the afternoon and listen to American talk show hosts have to answer questions that they can't believe they're being asked about the Elohim, about the Khazars, about all sorts of stuff. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the person's saying, so why should I listen to you? If you don't know anything about this, why should I care about what you're saying? You're clearly ignorant and don't understand what's going on. And I'm listening to this, almost getting in a car wreck, thinking, my God, this is now starting to get out to the mainstream. And it's getting bigger and bigger. Trust me, because this is the answer to our question. Like, what the heck is going on in this world? Who is manipulating us and why? And the answer is that we've been being manipulated for a few thousand years by a group of beings that masquerade as gods when they are nothing like gods. They're just mortal beings. They live longer than us, yes, and they have more knowledge than us, yes, but they're not gods, and they die. It clearly says in the Old Testament, in the Torah, that they die, that they can be killed. And so it clearly says in the Old Testament that as soon as we began traveling around the world in boats and figuring out stuff, they brought a flood down on us and destroyed the whole place. So
we have a recurring theme of that.
Yes, exactly. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say, because I know a lot about this subject, that I believe that the Anunnaki, the SS occult forces, knew about all this and sent boats, people, airplanes, everywhere, all around the earth, trying to find the HQ of these people or beings or whatever they are. And I believe, I don't know if they found him or not, but I believe just that action alone scared the living crap out of them so bad that they brought the hammer down and in the 40s, and we've been under that hammer ever since.
And this is the new Voyages of the Seas, having these conversations here on this new medium called the internet. Let's get into the yugas of time also, how that relates to our trajectory through our galaxy closer to galactic central to the sun, how sometimes we have access to more energy, the ether, as you call it, as Claude is doing his research on that is also, and how in some cycles of times we actually go away from this access to ether and we become dumbed down and we become prey to perhaps these Elohim. Share that with the audience, how that ties in also to us being manipulated by outside forces.
Yeah. So in my book, Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday, and the previous book, more in the previous book, because the publisher freaked out a little bit about our information, kind of X'd it out a little bit. So in Monument to the End of Time, which is hard to find, but I did read the entire book on my reality check, so you can go back and check that out. So we talk about how our solar system oscillates as it goes through the plane of the galaxy. So at the equator of our galaxy is the plane of matter, like a plate that goes around the gigantic, huge center of the galaxy, which is the center of where we get all of our plasma etheric energy. And so it's like a transducer. It goes from the center of the galaxy to the sun, from the sun to the earth to us. And as we oscillate up and down, we come across the central plane where all the sludge, the star matter, everything is. And when we hit that for a couple thousand years, we are blocked from the main source of the plasma etheric energy, which is the center of the galaxy. The secret sun, the dark sun, the black sun, all the names that are called in the occult world for all this. And then this is what the Mayan calendar is watching. So we actually entered into this full blown in 1998, which is 666 times 3, by the way. And the full darkness was upon us. And then the Mayan calendar is measuring it. But really, we didn't really start coming out of it until just really recently. And what we're doing is the solar system is rising above the sludge. And for the first time in a couple thousand years, we're receiving this etheric energy for the first time. And it's like, a giant light going off. And the sun used to be yellow during the Kali Yuga, which is this time period. And now the sun is white. Why? Because the sun's receiving more energy from the center of the galaxy, the transducer effect, than it was before. And that means that we're also receiving more energy. Now, the Elohim know all about this, and they know about the Cross of Henday, and they know all about this. They're tracking all this, and they know that their time is almost up. And that even though we're suffering through the hangover of the Kali Yuga, that hangover every day gets less and less. And we're getting more and more clear-headed as we advance out of the Kali Yuga into the Dvarapara Yuga. And in that, when that happens, then they have no more power. And we will see them clearly. And a lot of other things are going to happen when that happens. We're going to think things and see things and know things that we don't know now. And
I interviewed Jason Quitt a year ago on his book, Egyptians and the Postures of Power.
Great guy.
That the human body is in fact an antenna. Explain how some of these iterations or these DNA modifications of the previous humans into the version we are now, manipulated by the Elohim, as per some of the research, made us so that our antenna was straighter and more perpendicular and able to receive more of this etheric energy, and how perhaps that was their ultimate mistake here, as we are now entering this new time area where we can receive more of this galactic center energy. Explain that to the audience.
So the ancients, and mostly in the Vedic texts, but also the Sufis and a couple others, they talk about the importance of the erect spine, and that health is guided by an erect spine. And I was like, what? Why would an erect spine, give you good health? I don't understand. It's like 30, 40 years ago, and I start reading these texts, try to figure it out, and either way, I started sitting right and creating good posture because I figured they might be right. And what I realized is that the etheric energy comes down around the earth. We have this torus-shaped cloud of etheric energy. And as it comes down into a vertical line. As it gets closer to the earth, it becomes more and more vertical and less curved. And So there is no resistance when that energy hits the top of the human head. This is why babies, by the way, have a soft spot right here when they're born. It's because it hasn't, the etheric energy still has a lot of work to do to recreate the baby. And we have to get the baby out of the womb because the womb's only so big and the baby's growing really fast. So the thing about human beings is we're completely useless for the first 5 years of our life. And, that is our power. And it's also, a lot of babies die. I mean, in the past, that was the number one cause of death. So, all of the ancient exercises for getting in touch with this divine energy are about creating your posture. It's about stretching the spine, getting it right, making sure that you stand straight up. When you're sitting, you're not slouching. You can never slouch. Slouching is the beginning of ill health. And you can tell when someone starts slouching, usually around their early 40s. And every time I see it, I say, stop slouching. Stop slouching. Do not ever slouch. You're falling into a habit. And by the time you're 60, you're going to be walking around like this. And you can't let that happen. So the Elohim, when they made us, they gave us this erect spine. Now, I don't know if they did that because they thought that somehow they could control the energy, or because it was the middle of the Kali Yuga and they didn't have to worry about it. But now that we're going out of the Kali Yuga and the energies are increasing, that's what's going on here. And you can just feel it. It's thick. It's like a hot knife through butter. Everywhere you look, you can feel that people are waking up. Even autistic people like Elon are realizing that there's something going on here. And if they don't join this something, they're going to not just be left behind, but maybe even worse things could happen to them as we begin to realize what has been done to us in the last 2,000 years. And I call upon everyone, to be compassionate about this. A lot of things happened in the last 2,000 years that were not our fault, yet we are blaming and recriminating each other for all of this when it was just desperate people doing desperate things in a time of great darkness. And we can't go back into the past and look at what the world that the Elohim created and say, I don't like you because you did that, or you did this to me and you did this to my group. If we do that, then we're falling back into the trap of the Elohim. So there is a God, there is a central creator. You are in touch with it. It's a divine creator that spreads its energy out through transducer, through planets and stars and galaxies. And we are the ultimate receivers of it. We're super important.
That's the point. You don't need a middleman. That's the whole point. Exactly why these translations perhaps were put in place, to put in place this middleman. Okay, that's a good point. And let me play a clip on that. But first, guys, this is the interview I did with Jason Quidd. You want to go watch that? It's still on my YouTube channel here. Very, very interesting book. And it talks of that. And I'm reminded as a young cadet in the Royal Canadian Army here, we had these very, very strict instructors. Stand very straight. Now I realize there was more to that story than just holding your weapon correctly. Anyways, that's fascinating. Thank you for that, Jay. Let me change slide decks here. And I'm going to bring up 2 videos I want to share with the audience members here before we go to the next topic. So this one here, share, yes. And the screen. Okay, so I'm looking at, hold on a second here. I'm just going to do this correctly. This one here, the first one. Okay, the first one I want to get into is this idea of dogma intruding and perhaps replacing scientific debate, and why that's a big trap, and why we're just trying to put that aside for a moment. Again, we'll get into the God aspect in clip number 2, but I want to get into dogma and why perhaps we should reevaluate its place in our scientific process, in our research, and our new understandings of things. So let me see if I can bring this up for the audience here. Okay. Of course, my dog. Hold on.
Oh, I thought it was my dog.
Just at the wrong time. Is that gonna work? There's somebody at the door. Sarah's here, but hopefully we'll make that work. Okay, I think we can now. All right.
We can move the beat, the God of love. Absolutely.
No.
He was a God of war. Only a God of war.
A God.
Not a God, of course. But
an
to
entity.
use this term.
An entity of war, a human
An entity
being
of war.
who uses war. Fascinating. If your interpretation of the Bible were to be widely accepted, it would completely destroy faith in the Bible. Is that not correct?
Yes, but what is important, and in the conferences, in the lectures, I always say that I don't say that God does not exist.
Right.
I don't know about God.
Yeah.
I don't speak about God.
Yeah.
I only say that in that book there is no spiritual God. There are the Elohim.
Yes.
And the Bible is the history of the relationship between Yahweh, one of the Elohim, and one people. Because Yahweh
You didn't much care about others.
no, the others did not exist, or if they don't want to submit, they must be exterminated. So the Bible is this book,
Yes.
nothing else.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that was the clip about God. It was the wrong clip here. I got distracted by my dog barking. But still, let's talk about this since I brought it up. I'll get back here to the dogma. So this whole idea of the Bible again, and the not just the Bible and the Old Testament, but in a previous interview, he's explaining that he went through 80 or 90 or hundreds of these different versions of the Old Testaments. And in all of them, they don't speak about God, the creator, as you've just expressed it. They're talking about these beings, plural, Elohim. Him in Hebrew, attached to any other word, means plural. So they're talking about these plurality of beings here controlling what ostensibly are DNA biolabs, and that these biolabs are protected by military ranked personnel, and their names are between the angels and the archangels, all the way up to this Yahweh guy who perhaps is the colonel or the general of all of this stuff. Speak about that a little bit, your understanding of your research here in the book, The Naked Bible, and also the gods of the Bible. Okay.
Let's not give Yahweh too much. He's a colonel, not a general.
Colonel, okay.
Yeah, and not even a very high-ranking colonel either. No offense, but here's the thing: is that all through mythology, everywhere we have these histories of people getting involved with beings that are manipulating us, and the church, when they finally got the Old Testament and St. Jerome began translating it in 400 AD, notice everything takes place in 400 AD, by the way. And he give the guy a break. The poor guy, he's like, Yahweh in his flying machine. And he's like, because the word Roush means flying machine. He doesn't know, the bicycles aren't even invented yet. So he's like, what's up? How can a machine fly? And say, well, he can't fly. I'm just supposing what he thought, but he's like, oh, it must have been his glory, his aura. He was flying on his aura because he's so glorious. And so he just changed it to glory. And so over and over, you see the confusion of the early Western translators. Now, here's the thing.
God has no control over his glory, to the point where Moses has to hide behind a rock to protect himself from God's glory.
Yeah, and God warns him. Yahweh says, hey, you dude, you better hide behind that rock because you're going to get blasted in the face. And of course, he looks over the top because he's so curious and he gets burned. And when he comes down from the mountain, he's got all sunburned, but he's not really sunburned. He's been burned by the machines that are blowing a whirlwind out the back of him as Yahweh takes his Roush, his flying machine, and flies around and manipulates everybody and everything. And over throughout history, we see the gods have flying machines. Vimyana in India, the Greek gods had flying machines. They're called chariots. And over, we see the same story over and over. They're interested in sex. They're interested in control, and they're interested in fighting and drinking. That seems to be what these so-called gods are interested in doing, and nothing else. And
to be clear for to be clear for our detractors and people who are giving us grief here for looking at this
Oh
research,
yeah.
again, we're not saying there's no God. We're saying that
No.
in these translations, the way the research is being done, and it's not just Moro Biglino, as you said at the beginning of the show, Paul Wallace, rabbinical councils around the world, Jewish priests and scholars are also coming to the conclusion that there's a lot of mistranslations, and we need to, at the very least, be honest about those and take a pause here before we continue putting and investing our energy into these creatures. That's just a normal adult thing to do at this point, and that's the conversation we're having. Your thoughts on that? And I'm going to set up the clip here on the dogma. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it is time for us to be adults and to look at things and see through the fantasy that's been created, because that's what children do. They see fantasies. They believe in the Easter Bunny and they believe in all these other things. And we're adults, and it's now time to look. And is it really possible that God could come here and not know everything? Because the Elohim clearly don't know everything. They have to learn things and pick things up. And so why would an almighty, all-encompassing God not know everything? And of course he doesn't. And because they're not gods. And so we can separate this out and say, yes, there's a God way over here that we can have communications with that will help us and all that. And our higher self might be in communication with it. But over here, we've just got a bunch of beings that are manipulating us, masquerading as gods. And yeah, I understand why people of faith get upset at this, because faith gives you so much comfort. And I understand that. But
sure.
At the same time, faith is asking you to believe in something without evidence.
And this particular faith is asking you to go kill people who don't agree with your faith. It's also asking you to sacrifice your children so that these gods can sniff the adrenochrome coming out of their abdominal fats. This is absolutely described in these documents. So again, we're just trying to follow the tracks here and grew up as adults. I remember as a kid, I believed in Santa Claus also. And at a certain point, I kind of started, that guy's too fat to go down my chimney. Wait a second, in my house, I don't even have a chimney. So anyways, I'm just making light of this. I'm not making light of, and I think Jay isn't either, about the good Catholic. I was born a Roman Catholic. I was altar boy at church. I went to church on every Saturday or Sunday. And at a point, I realized, wait a second here. I'm listening to the guy give his sermon. I'm like, he says he has all the answers. And as you said here, it comforts us to have all of these answers to life, who we are, where we come from, where we're going, all these things. But I said, but mommy, I said, the church at the other, the pastor at the other church across the street, he's saying the same thing. He's saying that he has all the answer and all of us are the infidels, right? So I said, at some point, we have to consolidate that and be honest here about what's really going on, and perhaps it is a control system.
Well, the thing is that there's a thing called the Bible Project, and it's being financed by a bunch of rich Christians and Jews. And what it's doing is trying to gather up all of the disparate pieces of the Bible from all over the world, from Ethiopia, from India, and everywhere. And they're estimating that to translate all of these different pieces of the Old Testament, it's going to take 500 more years. That's with AI. Yeah. So to think that there's just one God-given translation that's been passed down through many different languages and everything, it's just immature. I'm sorry. It's silly. And it's time for us to get beyond that and realize that this is what's going on, and that we've been their unwitting slaves for a long time. And it's now time for us to emancipate ourselves. Right. And that's what this is all about. As we move out of the Kali Yuga, which we are right now, it is now time for us to face up to facts, become adults, emancipate ourselves, and get rid of the ball and chain that we've been under for a long time. Yeah. And I bet you life gets a lot better.
Oh, well, that was my conversation with Penny Kelly. She says, once we remove this dogma, we could get into discovery. And that's way more amazing than the system of control we've been under. And she went as far as to say, grow up or shut up. And I'm like, oh my God, Penny. She blew up my show. But I'm like, yeah, it's not to be mean, but it's just saying, like, yeah, we need to grow up as young adults here. And that's what we're trying to do with these conversations. And I'll get into dogma, why perhaps removing dogma from our scientific process is important at this particular junction, and why also we need to have these adult conversations, and we need to be weary of those who want to block cancel debate, remove this from history. We've seen so much of that. And in the last 3 years, because you just mentioned COVID, I just want to backtrack on something. One, when you talked about the human being standing up straight, being an antenna to receive energy, our biggest antenna in our body for energy is our vagus nerve system. And now it turns out, if you read some of their literature coming out, that COVID and the spike protein has done irreversible damage to a lot of people's vagus nerve system. This was by design. Again, as you're saying, they're freaking out that we have access to these energies. So this is not just happening by happenstance. It's all coordinated. And I agree with you when you talked about the herding or the how do you say, the calling of the herd here that's happening, and why they're freaking out on this particular farm, just like you running after your chickens. The humans are loose and they're in trouble here. Okay, so let's play this clip here about the dogma, and we'll get back to our conversation. Does that work? Yes, there you go. Why is it not playing? Hold on a second here. Refresh. Oh, there you go.
No. Yeah, it becomes dogma. It's really
okay. I'm just gonna recycle that. 47. Yes. Okay.
And the problem is that often the opinion of the archaeologist becomes dogma.
Yeah, it becomes dogma. It's really very bizarre that it should be so. There should be no place for dogma in science. As I say, archaeology, the claim of archaeology to be a science at all is very flimsy. I don't think archaeology deserves to be called a science. But there is a tendency in also other scientific endeavors for a particular outlook to establish itself as the way things are. But the history of science makes it absolutely clear to us that there are no fixed or firm ideas, that ideas change constantly. And what was yesterday's dogma becomes tomorrow's waste paper. It's not listened to anymore. So I don't understand why scientists don't learn more from that. Even in the hard sciences, everything should be provisional. We are offering ideas, we're investigating a complicated problem, but what we offer is not necessarily fact. It is where we are now. And this is what I think archaeologists should be doing.
But often they don't want the aspect because they have the truth.
Many archaeologists asked actually why even my series was allowed. Should never have been given permission to be shown in there.
Oh yes.
And when you ask them to give substantive reasons for that, they're incapable of doing so. They cannot provide any substantive reason apart from what they say is we are archaeologists, we know everything. Hancock is wrong, and that's a fact. This is no way of debate and no way of argument at all. And it's a sign of a problem that we have in our society, where so-called experts, people who define themselves as experts in a field, dominate the field so much that they distort reality. And I believe that's what's happening in the understanding of our past. And it's why I'm grateful to Netflix for giving me the opportunity to make this series and to present controversial ideas to a large global audience and to set up a global conversation about our past. And of course, fundamental in the past of the world is the Bible. It's a fundamental document which plays a huge role.
Interesting is that the Bible confirms your theories. Also, if the Bible is only one of the books written in human history, but the Bible is the book of one little people.
Exactly.
Only one little family of Jacob, not of the Hebrew, of the family of Jacob. But in any case, the Bible, the contents of the Bible confirms your theories.
Give me some ideas about why. Why is it confirmed theories?
Of course, because they speak. The Bible speaks clearly about the Elohims that have a technology absolutely superior to the humankind of this time, of that time.
Yeah.
And so it's clear.
Yeah.
There is no discussion.
Right.
Only the dogmatics.
Yes. So it's a record of communication between people who had advanced technology and the people who did not.
But yes. An archbishop of the Orthodox Church several years ago told me, Mauro, because we are friends, that I agree with you, but I can't tell because the system kills me. So,
well, indeed, the system did used to kill people literally.
Oh yes,
the Roman Catholic Church.
I received a bullet.
Oh really?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Many years ago.
You received a bullet.
A military bullet.
And that's a threat.
Yes, with a letter in which was written that if I had continued to make the conferences, I made 300 conferences in Italy, Germany, French, Portugal, Croatia, Switzerland. And if I had continued, they had the necessity to kill me or to kill one of my family.
Serious business, this conversation and this dogma approach. Jay, talk about that a little bit here, and I'm going to bring up another clip also of why I think this is important. But in your view, How would you suggest the audience members go through these conversations? One, go through the research, because it's hard enough reading the book. It's hard enough when you're coming from a place and you're being shattered again. As Cliff High said 2-3 years ago, we would enter this period of woo, where we would have no solid planks to walk on, where everything we thought we knew, we would realize that perhaps it was false, and we had to recreate our worldview. So we're doing that over and over again. And we have this cognitive dissonance fatigue going through all of this. But the next part to that is explaining that to other people and getting these bullets, as Mauro was talking about, whether they're actual physical bullets or being blocked from conversations on Twitter. It's the same thing here. They're trying to stop this conversation and this waking up of the population. How do we navigate all of this, Jay?
It's going to be hard, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm sure that they're going to take some kind of decisive action here to stop this kind of conversation from going on. I don't know what they're going to do. Everything's gotten loose so far, and I can tell you from my own personal experience that they're screwing up left and right, and they can't keep all their fingers in the holes in the dike, and it's all breaking, and that's a good thing. When I was at I gave a talk about all of this at the Disclosure Fest in mid-November in Vegas, and I had a sold-out audience. And I remember I was getting into this exact subject near the beginning of my lecture, and there was this guy about 5 rows back to the left. He was maybe 30, 35 years old, and he was literally going apoplectic as I was talking.
He was foaming at the mouth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His face was contorting. His body was jerking around, and I was like, "Oh my God! I got to watch this guy. I don't know what he's going to do here. I can tell that I'm really having a triggering him, right?" And I got through the whole lecture. He finally started calming down. I quit talking about the Elohim, and he after I started the Q&A, he's like, "Okay, I'm going to call him." So I said, "Go ahead," and he goes. He was just breathing, and his eyes were wide open. He was sweating. And he goes, "So you're telling me that the angels aren't angels? They're some kind of aliens, and they're manipulating us? And Gabriel is how Jesus came into the world, and Gabriel was behind Muhammad, and Gabriel masqueraded as Moroni and started Mormonism." And I was like, whoa, slow down. You're making so many connections. I can't comment on them. And then I realized what I'd done was some guy had really studied, right? But he couldn't quite make the distance to where I was going. And then he made the distance. And then he didn't just make the distance with Christianity, which is probably what he was, but he started making it with Judaism, Islam, and all the extraneous religions, and realized that all of them, except for maybe Buddhism, have the influence of this group.
What happens to the Abrahamic religions moving forward? What's your view? Where are we going with all of this?
They're over. It's over for them.
Right.
I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, I believe that there is. I know that the religious people don't want to hear that, but where can you go unless you honestly face up to the fact that your religion has been influenced by these beings, and you aren't honest about it? Then you're not being honest. So why should we listen to you? Mm-hmm. And so you got to face it. It's not like, oh, no, you don't have a choice. This is what the book says, and you have to face it. You have to get rid of the fantasies and the fairy tales that you've been placing around this narrative, and you need to face reality. And the reality is that this entire book is a gigantic manipulation. I'm talking about the Torah, the Old Testament. The New Testament is a whole different ball of wax, and we can get into that someday. I don't want to get into it now because, except to say that it's a book that is a very positive book in a lot of ways. So they have to come to grips with this, and if they don't come to grips with it, then they cannot be listened to anymore. You must understand that the Elohim are a group of beings that are not divine, that are not gods, who came here to this planet, or they were already here. We don't know for sure. And they manipulated us genetically and through our religions. And the archangels are their troops. They're ground truths. The Archangel Michael's, which I don't believe is a person or a thing. It's a ranking. I believe that's the military wing of this group. I believe the Archangel Gabriel's are the propaganda wing, and there's other ones that have other duties. And
the Satans are the lawyers. It goes on and on.
Satan is their lawyer. The fallen angels are just a rebellion within the ranks. They have nothing to do with the devil or anything like that. It's just a bunch of angels who said, "Oh, we're not following orders anymore." And then they came down, brought Archangel Michael in, and came down hard on him. Or there might be more to that story than we think.
Right.
So that's, the truth. It's not going to go down easy. But somehow, a bunch of people are talking about it right now. And I believe that we're reaching some kind of coalescence here, where a group of people who are all different from each other, they don't agree on a lot of stuff with each other, but they all agree that this is what's going on here, and it's time for the human race to face up to the fact that we've been mightily manipulated by forces that are doing something here which is still a mystery. We touched on it briefly with the adrenochrome, but they're also mining this planet for gold, because we have a lot of gold here, and they need gold for their alchemical experiments. And they are, we're growing their food for them, growing their drinks for them, supplying them with sexual pleasure and all the rest. And also, we are part of a way to create a way to live for a long, long time, like thousands of years. So
you ever watch Jupiter Ascending, it kind of describes what you're just talking about.
Actually, it does. Yeah. Actually, it's too bad it was a bad film, because the plot was actually very interesting, and they describe it kind of close to what is really going on. There's a lot of movies that do. We're always on the edge of this thing, trying to figure it out. Jacques Vallée wrote about it in his book, Messengers of Deception, chose the word messengers, which is angels in Greek, right? So he even knew exactly what, and, there he was in the late 70s, in the UFO world, finding over and over this deceptive force that was manipulating everything from behind the scenes and causing us to constantly miss the mark. If you notice, if you ever follow UFO history, we're constantly missing it. The train's coming into the station, but it never lands in the station.
Right.
And that is because they keep messing. Just look at the Bible. All of the human beings get together and they decide to create a tower, right? A building that goes up into the heavens. Now, why would they want to build a tower? I don't know. Maybe they can gather etheric energy that way and get power that way. And so they begin building it. And what do the Elohim do? They create many languages and break everybody up. And over, we see this throughout the Bible, how every time we start getting it together, boom, they come down on us. And I think we got to get beyond that this time, and I think we are.
What's that line from that old 1960s spy show on TV, Get Smart? Missed it by that much. We always miss it by that much. I think we're close now. And in order for us to not miss it by that much, we need to have debate. We can't close debate. There's this clip I saw years ago.
Yes.
Let me see if I can play part of it here, just for the audience members. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. Hold on. Of course, there's commercials. Hold on. Let me get that off the screen for a second here. I'll get back to you. Essentially, Graham Hancock and Zahi are at the same conference here, and Zahi's having an absolute shit fit for being even in the same room with somebody who would even dare to question the narrative, the timeline of history, and in this particular case, also Egyptology and Göbekli Tepe, and how that kind of changed everything here in terms of the possibilities of timelines and civilizations around the world. Okay, so let me see if I can play this clip for you guys.
Don't say this word to me. It's a shame on you, not on me. Don't talk to me. Please, go away from me. Shame on you. Why don't you say something to me? Why? I don't know. This man did bad things. I don't know who he is. And I'm going to be called. I want to let this man know that this can be done. Because he's Look at opposites. These are all working. Please, let us.
So he's a crook. He shouldn't be entered to the country. It's pseudoscience. The debate is closed. At the beginning of this clip here, Zawi goes off and off and off. No, the debate is closed. The debate is closed. We can't even talk about this. We can't even reopen it. There's no evidence. Look at go back to the No, don't want to hear about it. That's what's happening to us on this conversation here, Jay. Also, this whole idea of the mistranslations in the Bible, we're hearing that now from many, many sources here. And to some extent, I agree. No, I don't agree. I understand the fear because, again, we're taking away perhaps an understanding or worldview in order to encourage, I guess, humanity to rebuild that worldview to what perhaps is closer to reality as opposed to this system of control that we're under. And a big part of me, and I want you to chime in on this, I'm taking a big offense to this blocking and canceling of this conversation because that's what happened in the last 3 years. They blocked all the doctors, the nurses, they canceled them. They couldn't be on mainstream news. All the doctors, they weren't necessarily saying, don't trust the vaccine, but they were saying, hey, there's studies to suggest that mRNA here, it could be difficult and there is side effects to that. There's studies to suggest here that perhaps ivermectin could do just an easier job. It's been around for 50 years. There's studies to suggest, et cetera, et cetera. These people were not allowed to talk on mainstream news. And so I had a few people on my Twitter the other day saying, JC, say your thing and that guy will say their thing and people can decide. I said, no, that's not how it works. People can't decide if they're only seeing one part of the equation. And that's what the government, the propagandists were doing, closing the debate, not letting all these other doctors, virologists, PhD, Nobel Prize winners talk about some of the alternatives here to what was being presented in the COVID scenario. And as a result, millions of people died. Millions of people now are maimed. They have a damaged nervous system, the vagal nervous system. Let me see if I can bring that slide up for you guys. A million people have myocarditis. We're seeing the all-cause death mortality rate go up through the roof. The unexplained deaths here in Canada now are up 300%. All of this because we couldn't have an adult conversation here about how to deal with the situation at hand. This is what Zahi is doing in this video also, and this is what we're being treated to now as we're looking into these translations of the Bible. Jay, your reaction to all of that, the stifling, the closing of the debate, the video from Zahi Hawass, and how do we move past all of this and just have adult conversations? What would you say to the audience?
Well, I mean, it was a perfect example. Zahi Hawass acted like he was 6 years old. I mean, I don't want to talk to you. You're a crook. When actually everyone knows what he does on the plateau there. And so him calling somebody a crook, that's pretty funny. I met Zawi once. I love Graham Hancock. He's a good friend of mine. Poor guy. He had to put up with so much crap because the Elohim, Graham, the Elohim are who's attacking you. I know you don't know who it is and you're baffled by the whole thing. The Elohim cannot allow the real past to be taken at face value. So it has to be expunged from history. And that's what's going on in every way. It's what the British did to the Indians in the Indian Civil War. As soon as the Indians had a rebellion against the British immediately destroyed all of the great temples that were all over India. Hundreds and hundreds of them destroyed by cannon fire. Did the same thing in Dresden at the end of World War II, the most beautiful city in Europe, completely decimated and destroyed. Why? Because the Elohim don't want us to look back and see how amazing we are. They want us to think that everything that we are is a direct result of their interaction with us, which is absolutely not true at all. And the less interaction we have with them, the better off we are. And they know it. And so they're not going to be too happy about this conversation. But you know what? I hear very many brave people coming forth in the last year or so talking about this. And I just felt like I had to at least give a hand to them because I know what they're saying is true because I hanged around with Jordan Maxwell. I know the entire secret of this whole thing. And those people are brave. They deserve to have kudos and applause for getting out front and talking about this. And that's why I love Graham Hancock. He's not afraid to just go into the mouth of the beast and get in there and take a couple of hits before he fights it. So we have to do. We're at that stage now where the exposure of this will expose the criminal machinations behind the power structure of the earth. And that power structure can't afford to have it known that they're following orders from another group of beings. They want you to think they're the ones that are in charge. And once we realize that it's not them, it's this other group, they're going to panic. And that's what's going to happen next. I would say that the more this gets out, the more we're going to see some kind of panic from the powers that be as they try to stuff this back in the bottle. But it's not going back. It's over. And it's just a matter of time now.
As you just mentioned, Tucker Carlson was talking about this the other day. We had the David Grush congressional hearings earlier this summer. More and more is coming out. And of course, you and I are doing the work. And I'm like, I produce 15, 16 shows a week. I'm like, this was not my intention to get into this debate. But now that I'm into it, I have to be intellectually honest and share this with the audience. My God, this is the question of our lifetime. And I was kind of told a year ago, like, JC, stop talking about ETs. It's going to discredit you. There's no there. And I was like, what do you mean there's no there? It's the story of mankind. Of course, we have to talk about it. So clearly, like you say, they're panicking about this. And now I think they're trying to catch up and maybe backfill. I'm seeing a lot of people getting to this narrative and adding mud to the water. But that's for another topic. Let me just bring this up here also. This was the link I was talking about here. Study finds all proteins required for SARS-CoV-2 infections present in the human vagal nerve system. Again, this was not by mistake. It's by design, guys, and it has to do with the culling of the population, like we were talking about. And if we were able to have these conversations, and if we had not blocked those doctors, more people today would be free of these vagal nerve damages and perhaps myocarditis and these turbo cancers that we see now. And so I encourage you, for the same reason here, to not block this debate, because guess what? The Elohim are not gone. That's the next part of the show here. Jay, I want you to get into that. First of all, I took a snapshot earlier in the chat. Cliff High was saying there's no evidence anywhere in human history of good Elohim. That's all fantasy, because we're getting now, as I just told you, there's a lot of truthers coming out now, or truthers or researchers coming out now, and it appears to be a coordinated effort to muddy the waters. Oh, JC, we live in the duality. There's good Elohim and there's bad Elohim, and we have to be love and light. Don't get me started. But we're seeing that now. Jay, speak to that. I remember Stephen Greer having this huge fight with Kerry Cassidy 10, 12 years ago on a video, and he was saying there's no such thing as bad ETs, and Kerry's like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you serious right now? This was on our live interview, and at that point too, I realized, oh wow, there's a huge concerted effort for us not to know reality. And speak to that point, the no evidence of good Elohim, why they are absolutely devastating to humankind, and why we need to have this conversation, not just for the sake of rewriting our history books, but perhaps in our future, maybe very near future, dealings with the Elohim themselves in actual contention. And that's what apparently our military is talking about right now in a big way. Jay.
Yeah, we're definitely moving to a head on this whole situation, and it's going to get very, very serious very soon. And that's why we have to get ahead of it, because yes, they're going to muddy the water. I can tell you from my film JFKX that I have never seen a muddying water event in my whole life like I've gotten from the establishment, who clearly does not want the truth about anything coming out. I'm astonished. I thought that they might be suffering from fatigue or something, but they're not. They're coming at everything full tilt boogie. So yeah, that this is it. This is the final curtain call of the whole thing. And everyone, we're not reaching the same conclusion at the same time. What we're doing is we're all deciding to speak about it at the same time. And that is something that they did not count on, to have it coming from so many different angles at the same time. We're going to disagree on a lot. I'm not totally convinced that they're space aliens. I still think that they come from here, that apparently Tucker believes also. I believe they've been here somewhere with us for a long time. Now, I'm willing to entertain the space alien thing. I just have some qualms about it. I have been told by someone high up in the intelligence agency of a foreign country that they're going to introduce us to these guys within the next year on television, and that they do not look exactly like us. They look sort of like us, but they look enough different from us that it's going to cause us some anguish. I'm not sure what that means or whatever, but it doesn't matter because I don't trust them anyway. So you can introduce me to 100 of them. I'm not going to trust them because there are no good Elohim. There might be some that are a little better than others. Maybe Enki was on our side. I don't know. But and another thing is, are there any female Nephilim or Elohim? Are there any female? I keep looking for a female Elohim, and I can't find any. They all apparently seem to be all of the male ranking. So maybe.
And in Dark City, there's no females either. It's all males.
Yeah, it's all male.
Yeah.
So the original patriarchy starts there, I guess. I mean, I don't know. And anyway, we're at that stage. They're not gods, and we need to stop worshiping them as gods. And when they show up at our door acting like they're some kind of exalted being, we need to tell them to go take a hike. And anything they say is not going to be true anyway. So why listen to them?
Why listen to them indeed? I just read this amazing essay, I guess you can call it that, Elohim, Current Capacity in Contention. This is brought forward here by Claude on his Substack, and I'm going to bring that link down for you guys here. We're talking about some information that could help our military minds, and even ourselves to some extent, put together strategies and tactics if and when here, as it's being forecasted, we could be in physical contention with these beings again here in our realm. Now, you and I have talked about this on the shows before. You kind of alluded at the beginning of this show that all the wars here on the planet, here in 3D, are really proxy wars for what's happening perhaps above. You mentioned that you didn't know where they were. Interestingly enough, let me scroll down here. That was interesting. Claude put this out here too. This is AI generated here. But the idea was that they could still be here on the planet, but using this type of, not a dome, but a greenhouse effect to capture whatever GONS or etheric energy so that they can live longer and healthier and all that while we're in these descending yugas of time. And that perhaps they have this same contraption also on the moon. And that's why we're seeing all the contention on the moon right now. I had Bruce Cizal on the show a couple of times, and he's looking at explosions, projectiles, so many things that are hard to explain at this point, all happening on the moon. And of course, this Kash Patel video just a couple of days ago, suggesting that the military officials and this Space Force taking full operational control just a couple of days ago, suggesting that they are currently in contention physically with these beings off-world and perhaps in some places here on the planet. Your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, that's why I'm on the fence. I mean, I see all this, and I know not a lot about the moon. I've been studying it for 40 years. I know there's all sorts of stuff all over the moon that doesn't make any sense unless there's some kind of beings that live up there and are, messing with us from the moon. We know, of course, that the moon has all sorts of lore about all of this, and we know the moon's probably hollow, and the whole Apollo program was designed to hide what they were really doing, and of course they were looking for other things. We now know that, and and I think so. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of evidence that they might be off planet. I'm not sure. I got my problems with the off planet thing is immune system problems. How a species could arrive here without a hermetically sealed suit and be able to survive the attack of various microorganisms and things. And so to me, that suggests that these beings have some relationship with the earth.
But at the same time, you and I have talked about this before, where in interactions with the high priests and these Anunnaki or the Elohim, they have to go through this washing process, anointing of oils, all of this, because perhaps these are beings that are super afraid of catching any virus or any disease from us, the animals here on the planet. So there is that too. They are afraid of us for that reason.
Well, they are, and they should be. I mean, we're filthy creatures, so we really are. I mean, we aren't in the West anymore, but we used to be. The whole cartoon Pepe Le Pew about the skunk, well, that was how the American servicemen thought that the French really were when they went to France and occupied. And that came from that. So, yeah, we're not exactly the cleanest creatures on Earth. We are a little better now than we were. And back in those days, I would have wanted to a human being to take a bath and get rid of the filthy clothes and put on some anti-biological and other kinds of ointments before they met me too. So it's perfectly understandable why they went through all these rituals in the Bible that you had to do before you went to meet the Elohim. And the Elohim were very concerned about catching diseases from us. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else? We're an hour and a half almost into this, Jay, and I know we could go for 5 hours more on the topic, but for today, in the context of what we've brought into, we're not saying there's no gods. We're really looking at these translations of the Bible. We're encouraging people to have the conversation. We want to, at least for a period of time, put dogma to the side here just for a second so we can have idle conversations. You mentioned the alchemy. Perhaps we can go back to that, the yugas of times, where the Abrahamic religions go through all of this. But really, all of that ties in also, Jay, to us moving into the age of Aquarius. We need to become the bearer of this knowledge. It's nobody else's thing anymore. We need to be able to internalize our information. And that's what's going to save us here in this transition. Let's talk about that. Us moving into the age of Aquarius and why perhaps all of this information is bubbling out now to the surface in rapid fashion.
Yeah, there's a story in the New Testament. Jesus is talking to the apostles. I can't remember where it is, but Jordan, he used to talk about this all the time. And Jesus is saying, they say, oh, when will, the new world come, when we can get rid of all the evil? And he says, well, it'll come when you see the man carrying the vase full of water, which is, of course, the age of Aquarius. And so that's what's so important about this age that we're in right now. We just passed the third year. No, today is the third year that we passed into the age of Aquarius. And I'm building my Yuletide fire tonight in honor of the solstice. And so we have to remove the shackles of slavery. That's what we have to do. And when we do, then we will begin thinking of the world in a new way, and the free energy will come back and all of the other things that they put the governor on. I mean, we look back at what we call Tartaria, and we see all these old buildings in Serbia. They're actually all over the world. They're in Japan and China and South America, and they have these round rotundas with the spires coming out of the top. And clearly there's some kind of free energy device that's been truncated and severed by some force that doesn't want us to have it. And again, we're beginning to realize what these were, what this means. And all of this actually comes from, believe it or not, Vladimir Putin releasing all the maps of Tartaria in 2013. Mm-hmm. People don't realize that he one day just released like 400 maps that were in the archives in Russia that showed the maps of Tartaria. And for the first time, not the first time, but for the first time in a big way, we saw that there was this big, huge country that we don't know what happened to it. And again, lost in the annals of history, just like the 1,000 years that are missing from 400 to 1400. Mm-hmm. We just don't know what the hell's going on back there.
Right. Just going back to alchemy a little bit here, your channel is designed, the logo with the alchemical process. You've talked about this many times on our show before. I understand that you're working on basically an alchemy course compendium that you want to share with humanity here. Speak about this project. When can people expect to see that online, and where will that reside?
Well, I'm doing a 3-part thing. I'm going to do a documentary film first on the whole thing, just to get everybody's appetite whetted so they know what it is I'm talking about. And then I'm going to do a probably a live course that'll be just sort of touching on it. And then in about a year or so, I'm going to do an online free course where I go into, I don't know, it could be 30, 40 episodes at this stage, where I'm going to talk about everything. The entire idea of correspondences, which is the great thing that the Elohim discovered about how there's correspondences between elements and planets and things. And, the Elohim aren't stupid. They're really, really intelligent, have a fundamental, incredible understanding of a holistic understanding of this universe. The problem I have with the Elohim is the way they treat us. Like we're dumb, idiot like just off the farm.
Or their cattle. Yeah.
Yeah, we're cattle, essentially. Yeah, we're goyim, and so they and I resent that. I know that I'm intelligent enough to understand what they're saying to me, and I resent the fact that they are keeping this knowledge away from us. And this is the big problem. You go back through all the alchemy books, as I have, hundreds of them, different languages and all sorts of things, and every book is different than the other book. And I realized at a certain point that they had sowed so much confusion into the whole thing, they didn't want us looking at it, that although there's a lot right in every book, there's also a lot wrong. And that is why I kind of threw my hands up about 10 years ago with all of studying, medieval alchemy or Arab alchemy or Indian alchemy or Chinese alchemy. I just threw my hands up and I went back to Egypt, figuring that was the closest source to what I was looking for. And as I got into Egypt, that's when I came into contact with the idea of these off-planet intelligences manipulating us and doing all sorts of other things to us, but also the secret of the elixir of life, and that we do have this ability to supersede the world that we've inherited and create a newer world that will function a lot better.
I was going to bring you in the whole conversation of Kundalini awakening and how to use sex in an alchemical process, but that's going to be for a whole other show. I think we've already blown the minds of our audience. Okay, so let's put that aside for a second here.
I think so.
Yeah, you and I have gotten in trouble for that in the past. Share with the audience members maybe one alchemical secret. You talked about Isis earlier, perhaps what she learned through the process. What can we learn right now before we get into all of these courses and these life documents of yours? Whet the appetite, so to speak, if you can, now to this audience before we go, Jay.
What alchemy and what the Elohim know that we don't know, but we will soon rediscover, is that we live in a gigantic invisible universe in which there are many forms of intelligence and life all around us that we don't know about, and that we can contact those life forms and have them assist us in various ways, like exposing the Elohim. And that we can do various practices, both in lab and personal practices, that allow us to get in contact with these ethereal plasma forces that will not just enhance our own intellect and curiosity, but our own physical health. And once we understand, see, that's the thing they don't want us to know. They don't want us to know that we're actually in control of everything. Right. And that once we take control of our health and our psychic abilities and all that, then we're free of them. Mm-hmm. And they don't want that. So it's the one thing, the number one mission of the Elohim is to suppress our natural divine nature. Yeah, and they don't want that to come out. Yep, this connection that we have with the larger ethereal forces. So they dumb us down, they give us drugs, they make us drink alcohol and do all sorts of terrible things to enclose our ethereal body and to make it shrink down to skin level, so that we're just pretty much on the life support. And we're barely alive, but we're giving them all of our energy, because that's the thing that you have to understand. The Elohim love to suck off our energy, our negative energy. They love it. They like to create negative energy and then watch us all go, ah, and then they come in and they draw it off. So the Archons and the Elohim are the same thing. Mm-hmm. Let's not doubt that they're all the same thing. And we have to start realizing that we have been messed with majorly by these forces. And we must learn to forgive each other for that manipulation, because it's not our fault that we got put through the hell that we got put through.
That's very good advice. Another good piece of advice in the chat, Cliff is saying, help fuck the Elohim algos here on Rumble and hit the like button. Yeah, thanks, Cliff. I appreciate that. We can fuck the algos. Yes, there's about 5,500 live in Rumble here and another 1,000 on Twitter or so. So thank you so much, everyone, for liking this. Hey, guys, also, if you're interested in the decodes Jay and I did on these Kubrick episodes. This is available now on beyondmystic.net still, and you can have them pay-per-view, one episode at a time if you're interested in that. Or if you want to support our independent media, you can use the Insider Access Pass coupon code. It's on sale now until December 24th. 50% off here if you use the code IAP50. That will give you access to all of our content there behind the screen, and priority access also to exclusive content there to the Insider Access Pass members. Jay, before we go, anything else that's coming up here on your YouTube channel? Any new interviews? Anything else you want to point the audience to here before we go?
2024 is the year I get back into filmmaking. I've got a film about Stanley Kubrick coming out and all the things that we're talking about. And I'm going to do a film, hopefully, about the Beatles and what they were really about. And then I'm going to do a film about the Elohim. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a fictional film like Cliff High wants me to do with him. I think I'm going to do both. A fictional film about the Elohim.
You want to do Bob the Farmer thing with the shotguns? Is that what you're doing?
No. That would be fun, though.
Yeah.
And but I think I'm going to actually do a documentary and go out and interview Bislino and Graham and a bunch of people and try to get us, maybe Cliff, and try to get a kind of a roundabout view of what's been going on so that we can do the final coup de grace and get going on improving our own species, maybe, for a change.
Right. Wow. Well, that's a great endeavor. Let me know if I can help. I'm happy to give my time and energy to support you guys on that. Guys, don't forget, tomorrow, December 22nd, yes, at 3 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to have Max Egan on the line. This is for a very special report of the War Correspondent series here on Beyond Mystic. This is Rumble only. The subtitle here is War Against Humanity, of course, and the Return of the Elohim. So you don't want to miss that. That's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern also, so Friday, tomorrow, yes, December 22nd, we're going to get into this here, the Elohim debate. Why or what are they so afraid of? That's going to be a fabulous conversation. Again, they're just moving the needle forward here and having some adult conversations here with our friends. Thank you so much, everyone. Was that it? Yes, and part 1, if you haven't seen it, please do go see it on Rumble. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you. I did see a few donations go through, and I was on the other slide deck, so I wasn't able to read that live for you guys. But a big thank you to all of you donating and supporting here on the Rumble episode. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And Jay, thank you so much for all of your work. Also, I really appreciate your time here today. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, sir. And I'll call you again in January, and perhaps we'll do that decode on that next movie. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day, and au revoir.
See you later. Merry Christmas.